Hello to Barbara Walder, who's been on this morning. And she says, can Councillor Nunn explain to the residents of Duston, Harpole and all the surrounding villages why they're allowing the closure of Sandy Lane for such a long period of time? It's going to be closed from June 2023 to March 2024, causing disruption to residents, businesses, schools and the safety of school children, cyclists and many others has not been considered carefully, according to Barbara. She says it's complete chaos. And she says she feels like she doesn't have a voice in this at all. So what's your response to that?
I mean, it's not good news, is it? I know Sandy Lane quite well. Travel it occasionally. A little while ago, I had occasion to be driving from Gayton to Brixworth 2 or 3 times consecutive days. And of course, use Sandy Lane. I was amazed to see, I knew the scale of the development that was coming. Amazed to see what progress there is on the development in what seemed like only a few months since I last drove it. It's a fairly busy road, and it's a it's a useful road. So the two councillors I know are very active on it, particularly Councillor Matt Golby from Duston, whose residents are very, very concerned. And yes, the Adam Brown, who's the deputy leader of the council, was talking to me too. He was off. I think he had a meeting at Harpole to talk with residents, about the plan to continue to make representation. I'm really sorry that I don't know in terms of what our powers are to prevent it to happen. Once we have planning permission given for a development, they then have to put forward a sort of method on how they're going to go about the construction. And I think there's quite significant upgrades there to Sandy Lane. What you can rest assured is that myself and all councillors, particularly the 2 local councillors who I've just mentioned, are really keen that it's closed for a minimal amount of time. Having mentioned it to me last night, I asked Adam to talk to me again today, see what he thinks the progress is, and we'll just keep pushing on it. I think possibly our powers are limited once the approval is there to go ahead with the development, but I completely sympathise. On my own patch near Wootton, we had a road closed for quite some time recently, and we now hear that they're going to have to close it again because the work wasn't done to a very high standard. That wasn't council work, that was other contractors who were putting in services for a new housing development. So it's incredibly frustrating.
So is there nothing in the planning permission that has this kind of clauses that say the work has to be done in a timely manner or with minimum disruption to residents? Could you start including things like that?
I think this is the bit that bothers me, really, because I think there is. I think once the planning permission is granted, there's then contractual detail over a whole bunch of different things. So, for example, on a housing development, they have things they call reserved matters, and those reserved matters aren't originally part of the planning approval. They get the approval, then they have to get approval for the type of materials they might use, the detailed look of some of the properties, what colour bricks they use, the roof tiles and all the rest of it. And I think as part of that, this is agreed. As councillors, we don't get oversight over that last bit. One of the other things is the method they're going to employ. So, for example, they talk about the time frame to do any demolition or to do any road building. And to me, this is a wholly unacceptable part of length of time to close it. But our planning committee as elected representatives don't get that initial oversight on how long these closures are going to be. And I think that's the bit we've got to challenge slightly. Highways is an incredibly important part of the whole planning process. When we were separate district councils, we used to get frustrated because the county council was the highways authority, and we at Northampton Borough or South Northampton or Daventry, we were the planning authority. And we would see a planning application, highways would quite nonchalantly write, we have no observations or we have no objections. One of the benefits of being unitary is they should all be working together because we are all part of the same council. I'm not yet convinced that we are, and it's something that we've raised as an important issue because our planning committee, when they meet to approve an application like this one, all that work that's going on around the sort of Duston and Harpole area, they should be aware of what the proposed period of closure of roads is, and they should be aware that we haven't just had a comment saying no observations from the Highways Department. They want to know that they've done a detailed analysis of what the impact on the roads is going to be. So on the specific of Sandy Lane and to Barbara and all her neighbours around there, really sorry, I think it's an unacceptable period of time, and local councillors and myself will fight to get that time reduced. On the wider picture, because this does happen in other places, we want to play a bigger part in the upfront period, so we're granting planning permission only at such time as we know what the impact is going to be on local roads. It's not a magic answer, I'm afraid, Barbara, but it's about the best we can do, and hopefully illustrates we're taking it seriously.
Absolutely. Well, the other concern Barbara had was she said she felt she didn't have much influence or much of a voice in this. And I know with planning permission, often the time you'll see a notice on a lamppost. You'll have a look. It's written in quite complicated language sometimes, and it doesn't always jump out at you what the implications to you are. If it had been a sign on a lamppost saying, if you're concerned about this road being closed for a year, massive roadworks going on and big developments, you would probably have been more, had more involvement at the start.
Yeah, I mean, I completely get that, Chris, and I think that's the point I'm making, really. Even as local councillors, you might sit on a planning committee. That planning committee considers the planning side of a development, but later details are confirmed on how long roads will be closed and so on. And I just don't think that's right. I have to be honest, there's not a lot of democracy in planning. The planning system is one that's dictated by a national planning policy framework. We then have to create a local plan, and that local plan needs to be mindful of the housing growth that we're asked to take to develop the number of houses. There's very little local choice in that. I know that's something that's been debated, but we've now got planning permissions approved during a time of very significant government targets for house building. So all the stuff that we're talking about here around Duston and Harpole was originally considered or allocated for house building a long time ago. We're currently doing a new local plan. We're required to do one for the new West Northants, which includes all of those previous districts of Daventry, South Northampton, Northampton. That's under consideration now. For those who are concerned about the volume of housing that our local area is taking, I mean, let's face it, we all know we do need houses. We need both private houses because there's huge demand, and whether it's buying or whether it's renting, costs have been spiralling. Equally, we need social homes. We have a waiting list in Northampton, for example, of nearly 4,000 people looking for council housing. So we know we need to build houses. We are all protective of our own local environment. I grew up in the village of Guilsborough, and that road, Sandy Lane, actually was a daily trip to school. So I remember all the open fields, and I went up to the age of 7 to Quinton House School. And anybody who's my age, 50 plus, will remember Quinton House was a building right in the middle of nowhere, and now you access it via a housing estate, because we look at that and we say, oh gosh, how much our place is changing. The reality of it is it has to change, and the reality is, as local councillors, we don't have that much direct control. In actual fact, we had a recent review of our planning service by a thing called the Planning Advisory Service. They're the professional body who advise you on planning. And they reminded us of the importance to consider planning decisions. It's almost, they use the phrase quasi-judicial. So when we have a licensing hearing, when perhaps if a licensee of a shop or a pub has had a complaint and a problem or a police issue, it comes before a panel at the council and they decide whether that person should lose their licence or something like that. That has to be done without political bias or anything at all. And similarly, planning gives people relatively little leeway. If there are what they call material conditions, there are a set of things that if they are not appropriate, that application can be turned down. But there's absolutely no whim or opinion in it. And of course, if you make a decision that doesn't follow those planning rules, naturally someone will go to appeal. And it doesn't matter whether it's somebody with a small extension on the back of their home. They'll say, well, it's my house, I think this is perfectly reasonable extension. They'll go to appeal, and the planning inspector will then support their planning application. On a large development, that normally involves cost. If we refuse a large development and it goes to inspector or to a full planning review, then that can be a very costly thing as well. So just to recap on the fundamental point, which is Barbara's concerned about Sandy Lane, very concerned too. Local councillors are making strong representation, and I think it's just further evidence that we need to be more aware as local councillors. One thing they can do is they can probably ask more, or they can expect to be told more that will affect their residents. So we know how many houses will be there, we know how much land, we will probably know when the application is made how much open space there'll be left there for residents. We might also know how many social houses are going to be involved in that development. Builder may be building 1,000 houses, of which 100 are social homes or something. But the bit I think we also need to know is we need to know more about the impact on residents, how long the work is going to take and how long things will close. And if you talk to the residents of Upton, who's involved in a similar thing, the old clock tower there, where the developer developed the other parts around, which possibly were the more lucrative parts of the development, then the clock tower remained undeveloped for some time. That same point was made by those residents then.
Okay, well, I think that was quite a detailed answer for Barbara, and hopefully that's answered her at least put some context about how things are as they are at the moment. But I think this is going to be an issue that becomes even more important in the future with national government wanting to build a lot more homes, and things have actually, to be honest, slowed down a bit in terms of home building on a national scale over the last few years. So I think there's going to be, homes need to be built somewhere. So this is going to be an issue moving forward. I've got another question from Barbara actually for you. I don't know if we can have a double Barbara question today, but she's been back on. She's got a further question. She says, can you please ask Councillor Nunn to talk or write to all of the elected councillors and advise them that the people of West Northampton expect them to attend council meetings on a regular basis and report back to their constituents? The attendance of some councillors is a cause for concern to Barbara, and she says that we deserve better. Particularly, I think the second point, the residents of Duston and surrounding areas no longer have access to NHS dental services and would like to know what you as a councillor are intending to do in order to rectify this situation. So she's got two concerns there. She's worried about basically councillors not turning up to council meetings after they've been elected, which I guess is quite an important issue, and you'd expect them as a minimum to actually turn up. And concerns about NHS dentists not being available, which I think is a problem everywhere, and particularly where Barbara lives in Duston. None of the local dentists are offering the NHS service.
No. Thank you. And thanks, Barbara. I mean, these are both important issues. Attendance by council meetings. There's a couple of layers to that. One, there's their own council meetings, and then there's getting to local parish council meetings. It might be. I know there's a very active parish council in Duston, so I'm not sure if that's a part of that. Possibly, but I agree that's important. And certainly, council meetings. We the two roles are similar, but they are almost slightly separate roles. Which is to say, you are a local council, and your job is to come to councils and represent your local residents, so that every area has a voice, if you like. We have 93 councillors. In West Northampton, they're split up into 31 different wards. There's 3 councillors per ward, and your local residents' voice should be heard at every meeting. And it's also an important part of, as well as representing your local residents, there are collective decisions to be taken, which you take mindful of your local residents, but on strategy and budget and stuff to serve all residents county-wide. So I completely agree.
How much of a commitment is it? How many council meetings would there be a month that these councillors would be expected to attend?
Yeah, it is tremendously varied, but so I think if you looked at most active councillors, they'd be doing 15, 20 hours a week, putting into their council work, and that would be attending meetings. Email, we get tons of email, whether you're getting that from your residents or whether you're getting that from the council regarding committee things or whatever it might be. Certain amount of sort of training sessions. We think it's important to continually train councillors, particularly for the committees they're on. There's a lot going on, as I mentioned a minute ago, around planning and working on planning committees. Really important to be well trained on that. All the way up, I know one, should we say the phrase backbench council, because she's not on cabinet or anything, and she regularly does at least 30 hours a week on a variety of different things. So the dilemma always there is what you want a broad range of people, and actually you want people who are young and working. You want single mums, single dads, people across the whole spectrum, really. And it remains a challenge that if you want to put a lot of time into it, you either end up with people who are unemployed, unemployable, or retired. So it's getting that balance right. One of the things that the independent panel did for us, and we don't set our own pay or allowances as councillors, we have an independent panel. I think they were quite generous in the amount that they now pay a councillor. So I think that's an added obligation as to why you should be extremely conscientious and give some priority to your council work. I do sympathise a lot with those who have full-time jobs, and it's incredibly difficult to merge the two.
For anything that you do outside your full-time job, 30 hours is a big commitment, particularly if you've got a family or if you've got other things going on in your life.
If I take it down to the other end, you can be a perfectly conscientious councillor by attending sort of full council meetings and committees and so on. Let's say there's probably one evening, maybe 2 a week. You may have 1 or 2 local parish council groups or residents associations. That could be an evening or 2 a week. You're probably looking at, you could do 2 or 3 evenings a week, burn a bit of midnight oil answering people's emails and so on. You will occasionally have to dash away from work. So you want a sympathetic employer. If you're self-employed, you'll will sacrifice a bit of work time, and that's why the allowance is, reasonable to take. But that can be the level of the commitment. The biggest thing I think we find is those people that get involved as being a councillor normally are doing it for the right reasons, genuinely concerned about their community, and they probably come from a background where they've been involved in another community group or an action group, or they've got a particular subject that they're passionate about, and that's what first brings them to talk to the council, and they say, I tell you what, I'm going to have a go at this. And as a consequence to that, they've normally got volunteer syndrome disease. When a job comes up, they put their hands up and they volunteer to do it. So there are many of our councillors who will say that at the outset they thought it was going to be a few hours a week, and now they find they do a lot more, because that's the nature of the people it attracts. But that's the same if you join a parish council, you'll find yourself drawn in. And I guess if you join a golf club and you find yourself on the committee and so on, if you've got that volunteer syndrome. But to answer Barbara's question, I think it's incredibly important. Attendance is absolutely vital. We tend also then to deal with that within our party groups, and with our group, we ask people to really prioritise attending their committees. If they ring and they've got a family emergency, we like as much notice as we can, so we can get another councillor to step in, so that local residents are represented on the committees. But I completely agree, it's really important.
And I guess as well, if you've noticed that your councillor isn't pulling their weight and you're not satisfied, then that's the point of the election.
Well, it absolutely is. Yeah, it absolutely is. And also people's lives change. I can think of a couple of councillors I know who since becoming councillors, perhaps suddenly the child has arrived, or change of job that's become more demanding, so something like that. These things do happen, of course, in people's lives, but normally there's still a way as a councillor of being a team player. Maybe you pick up more of the queries in your ward, whereas your colleagues are more available to go to the parish councils. Just quickly on the NHS dentist thing, which is the second part, of course.
Yeah, which is also a very important point, I think. And I you can see how this has happened. The remuneration, I think, for dentists to take NHS patients has been dropping, and they've got businesses to run, and they've been struggling. They were quite hard hit during the pandemic as well. But from the general public's perspective, if you can't find a dentist in your area, you might have to travel quite a long way to get that treatment.
I have the same dentist I've had for 20 odd years, and each time I ring to make an appointment, I think, oh, please, I hope I'm still on your books as an NHS patient, and I'm glad that I obviously make small payment each time you visit, which is what you do. But no, I completely get this. There are many areas in which you cannot get registered with a dentist. In some areas there's challenges getting registered with a doctor, isn't there? And it's not about premises. This is about a doctor's or dentist business, because they are businesses ultimately, aren't they? They provide the most vital of services, but they have to be able to make a living. And I'm familiar with the Duston situation. I've known about that for some time, where they've now said, look, private patients only. I think the differential in the numbers is quite significant. I don't think anybody becomes a dentist just to be cold, hard, mercenary, make money, but clearly they have bills to pay, they have a business to run, they have overhead staff, and what have you. And in my experience, most dentists, they work a lot of hours as well, so they're hard-working people. And I think isn't it something like 4 times as much to deal with a patient on a private basis as it is to deal on
I think
NHS
the
basis.
issue with
it's quite significant, isn't it?
Yeah, the thing with the NHS is you get the same amount as a dentist, whether you're doing a complicated tooth extraction or just a basic procedure. And it's, you can see they're thinking, is this worth my time? I could be more profitable taking private patients. But I guess this is something for national government rather than on a local basis.
Yeah, it is. I mean, other than this obviously is so significant. A practice just going private only that. Clearly, it's become well known around the town. A lot of people have heard of it. I think it's had some media news coverage and so on. But nevertheless, we're uncovering a lot more of these sort of health-related issues through a new thing that we have called local area partnerships. You might know there's a big agenda to pull together sort of council health, public health, social services, along with NHS services. And there's lots of strands running off that. One is that we just don't go down the prescribing drugs route, that we look at more social prescribing for better fitness, diet, and so on and so forth. Also, it's about hospital discharges or bed blocking, as the phrase is often used. So it's about social care and the NHS working together rather than being almost competitors, which perhaps at some places they had become, with sort of blame, trying to work together more collectively to find ways of solving these problems. So we have local area partnerships. Each one of them covers, I think, 3 or 4 different council wards. We work with people like the police on them because they've got a community safety impact, and so police in Northampton, for example, have made their sort of sector areas coincide with these local area partnerships. We've got a wealth of health data to try and establish what the real challenges are within each area, and so that is starting to flush out where we have particular issues with dentistry, doctors, or whatever. One great example of where this has worked well is the local area partnerships. We sort of drive them at the council, but they are fully collaborative. One of the earliest ones to kick off was the town centre for Northampton. And the data evidence there was quite a significant problem with COPD. The sort of breathing difficulty. I never quite remember the longer name for it, but this is, we got significant lung problems and breathing problems and so on. And it seemed very, very raised in Northampton town centre. So the local area partnership, which is made up particularly of local councillors, but also, local GPs attend them and so on, were able to apply to the local NHS, and they've got funding for a campaign to try and address that COPD through awareness and so on, make people more aware of the dangers, what they can do, I think, to seek to mitigate it and avoid it. So,
do you think that has something to do with the air quality in the town centre or the traffic or anything?
I think to some extent, I don't have the expertise, but I think to some extent it is probably more of a town centre, city centre type of problem. But nevertheless, it's recognised. And if I understand correctly, I don't sit on that particular local area partnership. I've attended a couple of their meetings for interest. But if I understand particularly, the spike of the amount of COPD is even higher than you might have normally expected within a town environment. So it's certainly recognised as a problem. So I think what I'm trying to say there is, there's some positives in the way that all the different organisations are working together, councils and NHS. There's also some positive in the fact that it enables us to identify what the real weak points are. The downside of this one, you're absolutely right, we have no control over dentists as such. What we do have is an element of the planning system, of course. So sometimes, again, when a new housing development is being built, there can be a requirement on the builders to include various facilities. One might be to build a new school building. One might be to build a local centre where you can have convenience stores or things of that sort. The other can be health facilities, and that all depends on the need within the area. But obviously, building the building is only the first step. So you could build a nice building that works for as a doctor's surgery or a dentist, but you still then need a dentist practice to come forward and say, we want to operate our business out of that building. You can't take those choices away from people who are, if you like, independently running businesses.
Could you do something to incentivise dentists to take NHS patients, like offering them some sort of business rates relief or something like that?
Yeah,
from your side?
I think you could. We would. I think we would be challenged around that. I'll give you a number of reasons why we'd be challenged. We've just come through one of the toughest years anybody's seen for a long time. We've taken 30-odd million quid out of the operation of our council, and that's meant some really tough choices. In the last 12 months, nobody gets to spend 500 quid in West Northants Council without coming to a panel on a Friday and making a case for that money. So we've done everything to reduce that cost. Early indications this year is that most services are on track, but the cost of children's services is continuing to rise enormously. And so that's a real challenge. So what I'm saying is we have no spare money against something which isn't an obligation for us. It's possible there may be a way. We don't set the rates. The valuation office is an independent government body which says what those rates are. I think we would be very happy to consider ways of having, if we identified a problem in a given area, this is clearly an identifiable problem in Duston, if we identified that and we felt there was a way that we could encourage somebody in to take on a dental service, then I guess we would do it. Some of this I think is also down to, isn't it, a bit of a shortage of the right skilled people is a part of it behind there as well. So we have no direct influence on that. A lot of this mainly is government. But I mean, to put it bluntly, if there was a way in which a particular area of town lacked dentistry services more than any other, I think they all do, by the way. I think they probably all do. If we were able to do something, it's quite hard to say to people that at a time, so we're currently consulting on putting up the cost of school buses. You might know that.
Yeah.
That's a horrible thing to have to do. We ain't got a choice. We're charging less than most. We haven't reviewed it. It hasn't been reviewed for 10 years. It's quite hard at a time when you're charging, proposing to consultation has had a lot of responses. So let's see what happens. But at a time you're proposing to do this, and you're proposing to now charge people, it was unpopular for many when we started charging for garden waste, at a time when you're putting these costs up to go looking for trouble on things that you're not technically responsible for, is a really challenging one to balance. So
no, I can see that.
wouldn't make any sort of promises on that.
But I think people would understand it's about, what you prioritise, and something that's going to help with people and the cost of living. I think would be welcomed. But it's something to consider anyway. One of the things that I want to touch on briefly, because we haven't got much time left, but it is a story that has been bubbling away for quite some time, and it's the new car park facilities at the railway station in Northampton, and it looks like something is finally going to happen with that, because the council have approved proposals at their cabinet meeting last Tuesday for a new multi-storey car park with nearly 1,200 spaces at the train station, and with the removal of the old car park, that frees up some space for redevelopment as well. So it must be obviously satisfying to see this finally happening, although the demand for car parking spaces for rail commuters at the moment is quite low because people are using the trains a bit less.
No, it is. So, first of all, it feels to me like a long outstanding promise. When the new station was built, that's some years ago now, must be knocking on towards 10 years, I'm not sure, but it's been some time. And the talk at that time was, look, this is phase one. Phase two will be to enhance the parking a great deal. So it's taken a long time. I don't feel that it's a particularly nice looking, car park. It's got that temporary Meccano feel to it, hasn't it? People tell me it's not a particularly pleasant place to go and park. And I always take the view that Northampton and all the towns in West Northants, we deserve the best, really. Now, this is not, by the way, this is worth saying, particularly in the context of some of the other comments I made a minute ago about budget pressures. The key thing about all these projects is it's not sinking council money into them as such. There might be investment into them initially, and there might be borrowing, but part of the problem with all these things, the reason why you can't just say let's go ahead with it, is you need to make sure it stacks up commercially. You need to be sure that the return comes back. That, as councils, we can borrow money relatively cheaply, but of course the cost of that has gone up. So that of course is one of the reasons why this has gone on a bit. We were nearly there a couple of years ago, and then it's true to say that the cost of materials in building it, anybody's had anything built, major project or just a little tiny thing at home, you'll know how the cost of materials has gone up massively. Contractors naturally are very reluctant, or have been more reluctant, to fix prices. I think that might be changing slightly now. But the cost of the borrowing has gone up as well. So having thought a couple of years ago we were nearly there, we called it a bit and we said, hang on, we're still not quite sure if this stacks up. It does now. We're cautiously optimistic that we can make it stack up. And I suppose there's two or three things about this. One, first of all, we do deserve a better car park at a station. It's the arrival area for many people coming into our town. It's also the route to work for a great number of people. Although numbers are down, many of our London commuter folk might be working 2 days in the office rather than the 5 they used to. It's still used a lot, and so we need a good facility. We found a way in being able to sort of rejig the costs and also to operate the car park differently. It was going to be a private operator, one of the well-known companies possibly to operate it. We reckon if we bring that in-house, we can save a significant amount of money, get the council to operate it, and the money comes straight back to the council to pay the borrowing. Some of the other benefits of this you alluded to, which is that at the moment all of that space is taken up by the current car park. There's quite a lot of opportunity for some of that space around there. It's fairly near the town centre. It's not the most wonderful looking part of town. The car park itself doesn't look great. There's the nearby gravel yards and so on that have been used by the railways to store gravel, and it looks a little run down really, and it could look better.
But this could make a difference though, a nice smart new building instead of the car park.
I really hope so. I really hope so. So what would happen is the way the process would work is you wouldn't demolish the old car park because you need to keep car parking open there. So you'd keep the old one open, you'd build a new one nearby. There'd be undercover walkways, so you can walk from the new car park to the station undercover without getting wet or whatever. So it'd be a nicer experience in that respect. And then once the new one is open, you clear the way with the bringing the old one down. We're envisaging something along the lines of, probably the phrase is mixed development. That is to say, there might be an element of sort of retail, convenience, cafe possibly, but also some apartment living, that kind of thing. But to improve the area, again, we're very focused on building homes, and we want the homes to be of good quality, really. But at the same time, we just need to build homes, so that's a part of what we would do there. There's the further space. I mentioned the gravel yards around there. Those are being freed up and moved elsewhere, so they could potentially be for further development too. So there's an economic development argument, but it all stacks up to, if you like, wash its own face. And one last thing that's worth saying,
quickly,
is clearly traffic. Habits are changing. I think we're seeing quite a significant return to traffic on our roads, and I think we're seeing probably an increase in parking numbers. But nevertheless, construction method will be one where it could be an adaptable building if you wanted to adapt it, so only 2 floors were parking in the future and others were converted to residential. We could do that.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me today, Jonathan, and we will see you again next time.
Always a pleasure. Thank
you. Okay, we're right out of time now. Weather today, there's going to be more thunderstorms later and then drying out towards the weekend. It's currently 17 degrees in Northampton Town Centre at midday.
From the top of the National Lift Tower on 96.1 FM, online and on your smart speaker. Revolution Radio. Revolution.